What's up, everyone? Joining me today is William Qualkenbush, co-host of the Roar's Out of Bounds, alongside Kelly Gramlich. Welcome to the show, Qualk.
Morgan, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm glad you could have me on here talking a little Clemson football. It's good that we're talking football. You know, we didn't know if we were going to be doing that. So anytime I can do it now, I got to take the opportunity, my man.
Yeah, and I know you could talk about anything, football, the Braves, whatever, basketball when it comes around, but we're going to talk about football for sure. And you don't only do Out of Bounds, but you also call a lot of games, and you also do the fifth quarter show after the game with Mark Childress. How was that this weekend?
Oh, it was great. I love working with Mark. He's just good as gold. We have great chemistry together, and it's interesting when you do radio with somebody who is obviously in an analyst role. It's very different than when you're doing radio with somebody who is also a host. And that can be a little bit tricky. But Mark and I mean, it's seamless. Now, he may give you a different answer now. Don't take my word for it. But no, we had fun. It was late, man. I think it was like 102 or 103 before we signed off on Sunday morning, but it was a quick hour and a half with Mark on Saturday. I'm looking forward to a lot more.
I can see where you're coming from, because when I've talked to say when I've been on the show with Walt, I feel kind of intimidated in this sense. Like, I'm more of the host kind of guy, and he knows everything, it seems like, about every sport, about every player. And then on the other hand, when you get two hosts together, sometimes we just kind of keep talking and talking and talking and talking. And it's like it's a never ending show. So it's good to find that balance for sure.
No, you're right. And I'll say one of the best things, I'm very young, so I don't want to act like I've had like a 50-year career or anything. But one of the best things in my career is having to fill both roles and learning how to do both, and learning, the types of things that you say when you're sort of that secondary voice, and then being a little more analytical. And then when you're more like driving the show, when you're driving, sending a break and coming back and stuff like that, there's a different skill set that you have to tap into. And I think having to do a lot of those things throughout my early career, like in my early 20s, and trying to fill all of those roles, I think has been really good. And it's something that I think probably for me came naturally because I did a lot of things by myself. And so you have to do both of those. But knowing how to oscillate back and forth is not easy, and Mark does it really well. So I think that really helps our chemistry. That's really good.
Now, originally, I brought you on because I wanted to talk about the actual game, but now I'm nerding out about being a show host. As you know, I'm a wannabe show host myself. But so let me ask you, like, preparation-wise, what is it like? Give me a little glimpse on the inside to, like, say, before a game, because you've done so many basketball games over your baseball games as well. So what is it like? What's the main difference between, like, before game and after the game? I think after the game, is more, obviously you have to wait on the game to be played, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're and it depends on what you're asked to do. I was a co-host with David Stein with the Tiger Tailgate Show for like 5 years, I think 4 or 5 years. And one of the fun things about that is it's right before kickoff, so people are, geared up and ready to go. And a lot of that is like you get to talk about things that aren't about the game. So it would be, honorees at the game. You get to have them on. Legends, Clemson legends, you get to have on. Military appreciation was always about. We're crying tears on the stage and on air because of the stories that people share. So it's a very different deal. And then when I was asked to do fifth quarter, I jumped at it because I said, look, I'm going to do this Monday anyway when we're on the show recapping a game. So we may as well do it in real time right after. And then getting to do halftime, I love that. That's just something that I don't know. That just makes me a little bit of a nerd, I'm sure, but I love just talking about a game that just happened and getting to break it down for just a few minutes at halftime. I love those few minutes that I get with football games as well. So yeah, it's a totally different skill set. I think it's a little bit different because the tailgate show is very different. Kelly Gramlich and Scott Reimer, they do the Tiger pregame show before the tailgate show. That's the Roar initiative, whereas the tailgate show is more of a network, a JMI Sports, Clemson Tigers Network initiative. And so the goals there are very different. They're talking more ball, we're doing more the Clemson face, with the tailgate show. And then fifth quarter is sort of a combination of those things, but it's very game centric as well. You talked about baseball and basketball. Like the preparation for baseball and basketball is very different too. Baseball, depending on every coach is a little bit different. Monty Lee likes to go way before a game. So I'm at the stadium like 3.5 hours before games. And so you got a lot of time to sit there with the game notes and fill out your book and all that stuff, have conversations with people. With basketball, I get there about 90 minutes before, but I like to go to, in a previous time when, we didn't have COVID, I would go to practice a lot and talk to, anybody from athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches and assistants and people like that. And you get to know people when you're there every day that you wouldn't know if you just show up and do a game. So there's a relationship building element that I'm really going to miss this year, not being able to hang out in person with people, because that's a really important part of the broadcast. I'll find something out, 10 minutes before we're supposed to go on air and use it in the fifth inning of a baseball game. And it's just, that's the fun stuff where you get to provide a little bit of context of things that are happening. I know that's not why I'm here, Morgan. I know I'm taking a lot of time with that, but I really think it's important. I think it's important that people know like what goes into it. This is not a, roll out of bed, stare at a roster, go into a game. And even more so when you're not doing all, like when I have to do, volleyball or men's and women's soccer or, even softball or something like that, a sport that I'm not doing all the time, then there's a different level of preparation. And there's a different level of preparation when it's a televised thing versus a radio thing. So all that's very different, and it makes for an interesting life. I'll say that.
Well, it's funny because I remember doing, kind of off the cuff, wanting to do a live stream of Clemson, and I think it was Syracuse, the basketball game last year. And I thought, man, this will be so fun. I'm going to learn how to call a game just by trial and error. Well, the problem is I didn't know any of the players by number. And then also when I first started, I was trying to say full names of every Clemson player. And I'm like, this game's going way too fast to call out everybody by their full name and also not to know players right off the bat by their number too. So it does at least take some memorization as far as the players go. But I actually had a bunch of Syracuse fans watching that show and helped me out as I went along. And then pronunciation of the names too. As you know, with Clemson's backup quarterback, it's a little bit more important now than it has been ever. But again, talking about the game and specifically going back to Wake Forest, which is originally my intention of talking to you, but maybe I'll save the other clip for some of my master's degree or something, But so when you look back at that game, you got a chance to feel it right afterwards and talk about it right afterwards. Is there anything that you felt like you said, "Hey, wow, Clemson is a little bit further ahead than I expected them to be in this specific area"?
Well, I think the progress of the freshmen on the defensive line, even for a program that routinely sees freshmen show out on the defensive line, is pretty remarkable. When you have a guy in Miles Murphy who has 7 tackles, 3 for loss, 2 solo tackles for loss, by the way, which is unbelievable. The way that Wake Forest stats is a little bit unique, and so we were able to see that in real time just watching on a laptop. But so you've got that 7 tackles, 3 for loss, 2 sacks. First time since 2016, a guy did that in a debut as a freshman. Dexter Lawrence, I think, was the last one to do that. So, that's an interesting thing. And then he's not even the one that people care most about. You got Brian Brazie, who's in there, getting half a sack first and, tackle for loss. And he blocked the field goal. He blocked the field goal by himself. He could have gone 1 on 10 or 1 on 9, I guess. And he just, I said it was like Godzilla coming through and destroying the town. He just, he's 290 pounds. It reminded me of Ndamukong Suh. I know Suh's like 50 pounds more, but my gosh, that's what it seemed like to me. So they're further ahead on the defensive line. I think a lot of folks were probably pleasantly surprised in the passing game. And there's a bit of a give and take with the passing game because there's a positive spin and a negative spin. And I've seen both done by some people, and I think it's a proper reading of it. The negative is the wide receiver position as a group probably underwhelmed a little bit. But the good news is that there is a more diverse passing game in terms of the body types, in terms of the skill sets of the people catching the ball. You've got, last year you had T. Higgins and Justin Ross, who were very similar players. And you could go back down the line of Mike Williams and Nuke Hopkins, Martavis Bryant. I mean, these are guys that you're probably not going to run an 8-yard stop with those guys. They're going to be going down the field a lot. They're going to be, 50-50 balls and that sort of thing. That wasn't there last year a lot of the time. And Clemson was trying to force the ball in, a lot of 50-50s. And then you had Higgins less than 100% in the playoff. You had Ross obviously hobbled for basically the whole year. Now we know there were some structural issues there as well. So when you didn't have those sort of go-to avenues to get the ball out, there's a little bit of a freak out. Oh, man, what do we do? There were, I've said this a million times. It's my favorite stat. At some point last year, mid to late October, somebody did an analysis, and Clemson was using the middle of the field between the hashes 3% of the time. And that's crazy. That's more than half the field that you're just totally freely giving up. You're just not even going there. All your passes are sideline. You're either sideline short, sideline back shoulder, or sideline 9 route. And so you're not getting any sort of breadth and depth. You're not building anything at receiver. If you're just chucking the ball up and letting receivers make a play, it's a little bit, it's a dumbing down of Trevor Lawrence's skill set to do that. So I expected Clemson, because they self-scout as well as anybody in the country. I know their process for that. I mean, that I've seen the notebook. It's thick. It's really, really thick. They do it. This is a little bit inside baseball. Dabo showed me one time the notebook that they had done during a bye week, where they self-scouted during a bye week. And it was like, it wasn't quite the off season, but it might've been like this, but they do that. They self-scout all the time. The best programs know how to scout themselves. And so they let the defense scout the offense, and the offense scout the defense, and then they scout themselves. And if we knew that they were totally oblivious to the middle of the field as a passing game last year, then they knew it first. And so my thing, Morgan, was, okay, we're going to see this team because Braden Galloway's there, because Amari Rodgers is your number one weapon, and because these other guys aren't go-to yet, anybody. We're going to see them use the middle of the field. We're going to see them compensate for that lack of ability to access the middle of the field in the passing game already here in the season. They're not going to wait. Normally they wait 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 games before they get into the meat and potatoes of what the offense is supposed to look like. They're going to do some of that game one. And we saw a little more creativity, a little more tempo. They were making the defense flow. And then, as I say, they were making the defense beat themselves by forcing them to make decisions that they knew they were going to zag when the defense thought they were going to zig. It was really a brilliant passing game. A lot of people would say that, but that really was something that I expected to happen against Wake Forest on Saturday. And I think we'll see more of that as the season goes on.
Yeah, you have such great insight and a lot of great points there for sure. And just so many things come up in my head because I also had a friend call me, just like you talk about people messaging you or calling you or whatever. I had a friend call me, hey, I was kind of underwhelmed with the passing game. What was going on? And I'm like, well, let's take a step back. Trevor Lawrence completed, 22 of 28, 351 yards, of passing, combined for 3 total touchdowns. Now, we know 2 of those was rushing, but when I looked at the passing game, I was excited. I felt good about it because it was kind of interesting what you mentioned about a dumbing down of Trevor Lawrence. It did feel like you have this powerful quarterback who can do so many things at an elite level. And last year, unfortunately, it was like, deep to the sideline, mid to the sideline. This year, I'm not going to say it's good that there's a player not on the field, an elite player like Ross, but it is nice to see Trevor Lawrence come out and, with not even a full game, had, I think, about 14 different receivers get a catch. And, and like you said, see each receiver's specific, unique ability. They're not all the same. They all can do something a little bit different. And I even hesitate to even talk about Spectre like Hunter Renfrow, because I want him to be himself too. Even though he has the 13 on, I want to see what he can do himself. And I honestly think he might be faster and maybe a little bit more athletic than Renfrow. We'll see. His first game, I don't want to give him the Heisman Trophy yet, but Trevor Lawrence told ESPN he didn't want to try to do too much, but I'm kind of trying to analyze that. What are your thoughts on that? Because do you think he was talking about last year compared to this year? Or do you think it was a blank slate, just, a calm type of, mentality type thing? Because if you actually look at what he did, the types, the amount of the various different passes that he did, it was actually almost seemed more complex, but he comes out and says he was trying to not do too much. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. Can I turn a light on real fast? I feel like I got a lot darker since we started. Let me hang on just a second.
Yeah. There you go.
This is live. That's way better. Like, I love the natural light, but at some point you got to turn the light on. I was really like Two-Face, like Harvey Dent from The Dark Knight. So I didn't love that. Now everybody can see my face. I feel like I can be a little more clear. I gotta say, I agree with you that last year it felt like Trevor was really trying to force the ball. And here's something, like, I'm 31. So I'm still pretty young. I mean, Kelly Gramley, my co-host, let's not get it twisted. She's now in her late 20s, but she'll tell you she's in her mid 20s. And anybody older than that is old. So I'm old to her, but I'm still young enough to remember 10 years ago the types of decisions that I was making. And there is a youthful pride that exists, I think, in every capable young person. I've spent a lot of time working with not just athletes, but students broadly on Clemson's campus, but a lot of athletes. And they're very confident and they're very capable, not just on the field, but there's some really intelligent people who know how to lead in these types of things. But the thing that as I get further and further removed from college, the thing that I noticed that I never would have noticed when I was there in the moment is that there are times where you think that you not only can do everything, but if you don't, then that's a failure on your part. So you have people constantly, like, I'm constantly trying to pull the reins back of students I'm talking to, like, you don't have to do that. Like, you can ask for help. I was somebody that I led an organization when I was on campus. And one of the things that I learned very quickly that I did better there than I have done anywhere in any leadership role in my entire life is delegation. When you have competent people around you, you can delegate. I feel like last year, Trevor Lawrence tried to make every passing yard what a stats nerd would call an air yard, where you're throwing the ball to the point where the receiver catches it and gets tackled. And everybody can say that was an air yard. We talk a lot about quarterbacks and who's the best quarterbacks, and it is a knock on a quarterback when they throw a lot of checkdowns and receivers get a lot of yak yards. If you're Trevor Lawrence, if you're a Deshaun Watson, if you're somebody like that with Heisman aspirations, you're probably hearing that. You probably get that a lot. And you probably have people telling you, look, man, you can sling it, man. Go make that throw. When you go on SportsCenter, they're talking about Trevor Lawrence throwing the ball 30 yards through 3 people. They're not talking about Trevor Lawrence throwing a screen and somebody going 80. They're not saying your name. They're saying the guy who went 80, who broke everybody's ankles on the way, right? And so I think Trevor saw that, he heard that, and he made the decision. And I'm going to call it a mistake, but it's an understandable mistake that a lot of really talented people make, that he wanted to be responsible for every single yard. What we saw in the game on Saturday is something that I remember very distinctly. I can't remember if it was a Sunday night game or Monday night game. It was a Peyton Manning game, like early in his career. We're talking, first 2 or 3 years of his career. And he was facing the Ravens with Ray Lewis. Okay, it might have been a little bit later than that, but we're talking like no later than mid-2000s. He's facing Ray Lewis in Baltimore. And the whole game, Baltimore played a too high safety look, and they played basically umbrella coverage. And they said, this guy thinks a lot of himself. We're going to make him make mistakes. And Peyton Manning was something like 30 for 35 for like 202 yards that game. It was dink and dunk. It was underneath. It was Edgerrin James and Marvin Harrison. And it was make him pay, make him pay, make him pay. Whoever the tight end was at the time. It was like boom, 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 boom. And every drive was like a 12-play drive. And the brilliance of Peyton Manning, not just to do that and understand that's the way to go, but never once to give in to that temptation to do it yourself. Okay, like, I'm doing a lot of this, but I'm only dinking and dunking so that I can air one out and show people what I can do. That took so much selflessness from him as a guy who was entering into his prime as a player, and probably in his prime at that point. But I'll never forget that game because it was clear going in that Baltimore was going to do that. Everybody said Baltimore was going to do it. And the conventional wisdom said Peyton Manning is not going to play that game for 60 minutes. He's going to take a shot at some point, and they're going to make him pay. And they never wavered from that game. These are really good Ravens defenses now. They never wavered from that game plan, and Peyton never flinched. They played a 60-minute game of chicken, and the Colts won. I think that's what Trevor Lawrence is going to have to do this year a little more. Tom Brady has understood that in his career. Great quarterbacks understand that there are times where the 50-50 ball, trust your receiver, where that works. There are times where if the only thing open is a little screen pass and my guy can get you 5 yards, if I can do that and help my team win, then that's the best way to play today. And that's what Trevor showed us. Now, he aired it out sometimes. I'm not saying he was just dink and dunk and, little check down Charlie. I'm not saying that. But he didn't force the ball where it wasn't supposed to be. He didn't take a lot of chances with his arm. And so I think that's a point of growth and maturation for him as he's preparing to be the number one pick that people will point out in film. If he does for the next, we'll say 13 games, if he does in the next 13 games what he did Saturday, I think people will recognize what he's doing.
Yeah, and talking about Trevor Lawrence, it's not just him. Obviously, you have, Tony Elliott and the offensive coordinator position and just the scheme. And, many years ago, I used to text into the show and be like, what happened to the pistol? Taj Boyd did so great with it. And maybe it was because of Taj Boyd's limitations, or maybe just his style in general, or maybe it wasn't even Taj at all. Maybe it was more of the running backs that Clemson had, or maybe even the offensive line. I'm not really 100% sure, exactly why you would do that versus the shotgun. But I've always said, man, I love that pistol. Where's it at? Well, it was nice to see Saturday was a pistol formation with like two tight ends kind of slightly off of the line there. The first time they came out with it, they got called for an illegal formation, but then they got it worked out and it really showed that almost like Clemson is ready and prepared after all these years of fall off after Jordan Leggett to now the tight end is back on the scene. And not only that, big time touchdown. Really, the touchdown was trips to the left. The entire defense was like, look at these star wide receivers over here. Oh, by the way, J.C. Chalk's in the back corner of the end zone by himself. Somebody forgot about him, So it was really cool to see. And I think you even tweeted about anybody on their bingo card, or would anybody have thought about, J.C. Chalk being the first touchdown of the season? I thought that was like, wow, that is Tony Elliott kind of showing, hey, look, it's kind of like a little bit of a humble brag there. I'm not going to say, but for an offensive coordinator to be able to put together that play and it work out like that and completely confuse everyone and then shock the fan base. I think as an offensive coordinator, you walk away like, oh yeah, that I drew that one up. That was me,
Yeah, I'll say this. They showed that formationally, I've always said, before last season, we would field a lot of these, a lot of these questions about like, well, does Clemson even need a tight end? Like, why do they even have it? Do they even need one? And I would say, you know what? Not really, because you got enough wide receivers that can go out there. A season ago, you got enough receivers that can go out there and make plays. You got Ngata and Ladson and Ross and Higgins, and that's to say nothing about Rodgers and all the other. I mean, Cornell Powell. I think these guys are out. Travion Thompson, and so people are like, "We're not going to have enough room. Why do we even need these? Like these guys aren't catching the ball. They're not doing anything." We know that Dabo likes to run a tight end, little H back. They've done it since Chad Morris. And if you go back to Chad Morris's introductory press conference, what Dabo said is, "We want to be a power spread." Power spread is a little bit like what Chad is going to run this year at Auburn with Gus Malzahn. And the power spread requires an H-back because what you want to do is you want to be able to run the ball with authority. You don't want to be so spread that your run game is your pass game. Your pass game is an extension of the run. Now, they did that, and they can still do that with slot receivers and throwing little, the tunnel screens and bubble screens and just the, catch and throw it over there, that kind of deal. You can do all that, but you need an H-back in the formation. And so they really, even last year when they had so much receiving talent in the last couple of years, they really rarely strayed from an 11 personnel, one running back, one tight end for your audience. And so to see them go 13 personnel with 3 tight ends at times down the goal line, to see their confidence in not just Braden Galloway, but with Chalk and Allen. And then I haven't charted targets yet. I haven't seen it, but when you've got 25, I think it was, or 26 completed passes, and 7 were to tight ends and 3 were to different ones, and Braden is tied for the team leading catches, it's a matchup nightmare. excuse me. I mean, one of the things that's great about tight ends in the NFL is the way that it changes your formation looks. So if I've got tight ends, I mean, think about what Tom Brady's going to be able to do. He didn't look great yesterday, but the tight ends he's got to play with O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate and Gronk. You got 3 tight ends that you can line up anywhere, and you can change personnel to fit formations and formations to fit personnel and vice versa. And you can pretty much run any formation with any position group out there. Braden Galloway can function like a slot receiver. You can tuck him tight to the line as an H-back. He can block. You talked about the pistol. I was watching somebody, I think it might have been App State or Charlotte or somebody, Louisiana, Iowa State, I can't remember. One of the early games Saturday, but they would line up in the pistol a lot, but it was only to set up motion for the running back to pick a side. And I think what you're talking about with pistol, what I think the weakness of the pistol, it's going to be hard to do without showing. The weakness of the pistol, like I like it, because I'm a big fan of the pistol too, is that you still, if you're going to run, you either have to turn around and fake or hand the ball off, on either play action or handing it off. You have to turn around, put your back to the defense. Or if you're running the read, I remember my early NCAA football days, I was a forerunner of create a playbook with all the option plays. Like I was running Malzahn's offense, baby, but it was like everybody else's option plays too. And then play action off of those. Like one of my buddies was watching the Chiefs, and he sent me a text. He said, "This is like watching your playbook on NCAA football back in the day." Because I love that. I love like 3 fakes and make the opponent think 3 people have the ball and then, go downfield or whatever. But when you run the read, you have to pick a side. So you're taking the snap from the pistol. You have to pick a side. If you're in an offset pistol, like when there's motion one side or the other, you can theoretically still see the whole field. You can stay facing the front, read who you need to read, and you can kind of keep your eyes wide. Whereas before, your turn and you got to face one side or the other, it's hard to see your backside, right? So that's why I think a lot of pistol has become sort of like an offset shotgun where the back is still on the hip of the quarterback. And if you notice, we talked about this on our show today, Trevor has changed his footwork where he used to be like this, and now his right foot's a little bit back. And I think some of that is you can go more quickly from a mesh point to trying to throw the ball without having to do any footwork. You don't have to move anything, but you can still, like my feet are choppy right now, but I haven't changed my helmet. Where my helmet is where my eyes are. So I've still got peripheral. I can still see the whole field and who I need to see in terms of getting the ball out. And then if I need to read somebody over here, I can turn my head without changing my body. All that stuff is to say, I think they found effective and efficient ways to be able to use Trevor Lawrence in a quicker manner so they can play with the tempo they want, so they can have the run game they want while also giving Trevor some opt-outs if things don't look right without him having to do a whole lot in terms of changing his body language and changing his approach to the play if the first or second read isn't available. I hope that all makes sense. That was a little bit nerdy, but I hope that all makes sense for everybody.
No, I love it. I appreciate it too. And, they talk about footwork on ESPN and, about kind of his stance there. To me, it was like, well, how much does that make a difference? But, your explanation makes it a little bit better. When they first talked about that, I thought back to when Brent Venables was first hired. I think he came on your show or one of the shows on the Roar and said that he was going to focus first. I think, we were like, well, how are you going to get Clemson to tackle better? How are you going to get Clemson to tackle better? Because Clemson is terrible at tackling people. There was a time, I know newer fans are probably like, what Tiger team are we talking about? But there was a time when Clemson had a very difficult time tackling people. And Brent Venables came in and he said, no, I'm going to fix the footwork first. Like, they're not getting to the point of attack at the right time based on the certain situation. And it's all because they led with the wrong foot or they were, aligned in the wrong way with their feet. So I can respect that a lot from Trevor Lawrence. Even though it looks like it's small, it could end up being really big and kind of transitioning to defense. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but to defense, another thing that just, again, Brent Venables, how can he not amaze you another year in a row here? Last year, it was, well, he's doing the best he can. He doesn't have a full defensive front. He lost them all to the NFL. He's doing a 3-2-5 or a 3-3-5 or whatever. But now they're going to go back to a 4-3. Now they're going to go back to that traditional way. Well, when I go back and look, I mean, there's some downs they're 4-3, some downs they're 3-4, some downs they're 3-2-5, some down, and I'm like, wait a minute, or 3-2-6, and then I'm like, well, wait a minute. So basically, this is kind of like the ultimate Venables, I want to call it, because he can basically say, we're going to align any way we want, any way you want to throw it at us, because we can adjust. And it goes back to kind of what you're talking about with those freshmen, to be able to throw them in the mix on that and trust them and them be able to play with each other to, effectively. To me, I was like, Brent Venables has done it again. He has bested himself for like the 5th year in a row. And I don't know how he did it this time, but it blew my mind.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at Venables from a schematic standpoint, I haven't been around that many defensive coordinators. I came to Clemson in 2007 and worked in athletic communications. Then it was a sports information office. And so we would get to be at interviews and we would transcribe quotes from coaches and things like that. And so you learn to kind of hear what coaches are saying. And like, I was here for Kevin Steele. And I think Kevin Steele was the first one that I didn't spend a lot of interview sessions with Kevin Steele. I think more than anybody on staff, I really like to hear Brent Venables talk, because the things he says, I know he's saying them in a way that a football coach is saying them. But to me, as someone who, and I'm going to go ahead and out myself that this is going to make some people roll their eyes, as somebody who's like a Madden player and an NCAA football video gamer, and somebody who like legitimately felt like I had to learn defense because if not, my buddies were going to beat me in our online dynasty. Like I need to learn how to do this. I need to learn how to, make checks at the line, and I need to learn about things that Brent Venables talks about all the time. And so these things that I think about when I'm like sitting in my dorm as a student at 1 a.m. when my buddies beat my brains in 49-7, I'm like, why is my defense unable to stop them? Are things like formational integrity. He talks about that all the time, that he wants to create 3 levels to your defense. And when you get flat, when you don't have formational integrity, it falls apart. He talks about leverage a lot. And by leverage, he does mean an individual on a tackler, but he really means an individual on a formation. So not allowing, a tight end or a pulling guard to set the edge of your box on defense, not allowing a wide receiver to seal a cornerback in, but that cornerback is going to turn somebody upfield so that your players can pursue, not allowing a defensive tackle to get pancaked so that there's a big gaping hole right in the middle of your defense. So he's big on these things. And when he talks about when he talks about an offense that they can really stress you, what he means is they make you line up in a way that is I think of it as like an amorphous blob where the defense has to constrict and contract based on where the people are, right? So if you're a team that's quote unquote stressing Brent Venables, what you're doing is you are making it more difficult for him to make the call he wants, because he might want to blitz this guy here, but there's a slot receiver there that he's got to have a body over. He might want to attack a back with an edge rusher, somebody off the edge who's weak in pass protection, but they do a good job of slipping the back out. And so he's talking about these things, and those are just 2 examples. There are 100 different ways you can do that. But when he says things like that, I've got the recorder down. I'm back and forth with Brent Venables. There's a point in every Venables interview where he like leans forward and kind of gets real scary, like Monsters Inc. He'll do that, wave his arms, whatever. And that's when you know you're getting good Brent Venables. It's so interesting to hear him, because the thing you talked about, the principle of tackling and getting guys footwork correct and making that, just being like maniacal about these things. He does that in a schematic, thematic, practical way every year. Doesn't matter. You talk last year, they had 7 DBs on the field a lot against LSU. They had 6 safeties on the field at one point. Who does that? That's not a real thing. I'm going to tell you right now, there's no 6 safety setting in Madden. Okay. You can't do that. Brent Venables did that because that was his best chance to win. And now, like you said, he's just basically toying with people. Oh, you want to go, one of my starting ends and a bunch of my backup defensive linemen are out. Okay, well, I'll just throw all these backup linebackers in there and we'll stop you 3 and out. Or 2 starting corners are out. Well, okay, that's fine. I mean, they might get beat some, but we'll just throw whoever out there and it'll be fine. We'll go 4-man line. That's great. Oh, but we're actually going to go 3, and the third is Brian Brazie, and we're just going to twist him way around and basically have 3 edge rushers on this play. So good luck with that. I mean, those are the kinds of things that Brent Venables does He's a mad scientist on defense in really peculiar ways. But just for me, there are some people that would be like, dude, I don't care. It doesn't matter. For me, as somebody who really wants to understand how stuff works in sports, because I got to tell you, I mean, I call high school games every week. I got to tell people, why did that play break down? I got to help people with it. I got analysts to help me, but it's easier if I can help we're going back to radio mechanics here, but it's easier for me if I can help my analysts by leading them into a question because I kind of understand what happened. I feel like Brent Venables is really helpful with that. If you know what he's saying, because he thinks about things in that way and he wants to approach things in that particular way. And that's why he has great defenses all the time, because his players understand the things that he's about: setting the edge, creating leverage, maintaining leverage over the opponent, not getting stressed, finding a way to relieve stress amongst yourselves in a given down. And then, like you said, having proper technique, having proper footwork, and allowing yourselves to flock to the ball. 11 hats to the ball is a pretty popular saying. I think Clemson does that better than anybody.
Yeah, and I'll tell you my little secret on NCAA, which they don't do NCAA anymore. I had to go back and play 14, but I used to, back in the day, line up in the 4-3 with Clemson, and then at the last second, pull Ricky Sapp back. Now, at the time, it didn't have player names or anything, but it was Ricky Sapp, and he was super fast on the corner. And so nobody was expecting me to drop him back because he was so fast. They took advantage of him in coverage, but then was also able to run down the running back if I needed to. You could probably have done that with Isaiah Simmons if they would have had that out too. But Brent Venables can do that with a lot of players this year, and it's really exciting to see. I was excited to see Trenton Simpson, but also, again, talking about the line, excited to see there were a couple of times in there where there were only two true down linemen, Brian Brazie and Jordan Williams. One time I saw there were the only two ones in their 3-point stance. Everybody else was kind of standing up, moving around, and I even think of just how interesting it is, or how difficult it must be, from a Madden perspective, as you want to say. You can see it drawn up in your point of view. You can see it kind of on the map, if you will, on the field. But imagine Brent Venables. He's down there on the sideline. There's a peripheral you don't have. You can't see everything. And then those players on the field are seeing it from the opposite. So they have a different perspective than I could even imagine. So, on top of all the other things they do great, just being able to, do it from the field, is really cool, because on the offensive side of the thing, until this year, you had to have one guy on the ground and one guy up in the box. But again, I'm here with Qualk from Out of Bounds with the Roar. And Qualk, thank you so much for joining me. I know Deb or Ben's going to be really mad if we were on the radio, because we have not gone to break, and I'm pretty sure we're through an entire hour here. I was not trying to keep you this long, but I really appreciate it, and for you being a part of the show. Tell us, obviously, you're going to be on your normal weekday show, but is there anywhere that our followers, let's say they just happen to not be able to follow you, what's your schedule look like this week so they can follow you?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to do long form anytime. When we're not having somebody in your ear going break, or somebody in the window going, you got to go to break, or we're all fired. So that's really good. You can follow me on Twitter at Qualk Talk. I tweet about, I would say, mostly sports. It's an election year, but people suck. So I'm not tweeting as much about politics now. I like to make people think on that. But particularly on football Saturdays and Sundays, I like to get after it on Twitter. And, I'm on Facebook. You can look me up on Facebook. I might have a moment of weakness and accept a friend request. I have friend requests from a lot of people who just know me from the show. I don't check that all the time, but yeah, that's where. And then you can check out our show noon to 3 every single day on the Roar. You can check that out on the Roar.radio, WCCPFM.com, across Purdue Plain and around globe, as we say. And also on the Roar mobile app, which is great. And you can also listen via podcast. Every hour of every show, all 13 hours, every single day that we do on the station is podcasted. So if you miss anything, you can do that. If you want to hear some commercials, we have some catchy commercials. If you get one stuck in your head and you need to hear it, you can probably find those too. So yeah, like I say, I love talking ball like this, and in the long form way, it gives a little bit more freedom to expand on some things that you can't really expand on traditional radio. So this is fun.
Yeah, you talk about commercials too. I mean, I want to know how I get a commercial. Mark's got one, you've got some, Kelly's got some. I want to get in there and say, it's the sauce. You know, that's
it's all about the sauce. Yeah, you're gonna have to find a different one. We know about the sauce. That there is but one voice that for pizza sauce. We can maybe work on that. We can put pressure on upper management and upper management, as they say, boss lady. Make that happen.
All right, Qualk. Thank you again for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Morgan. Always a pleasure. Anytime.